a lot of different hypothetical situations, and during our negotiations in 2020, when we were doing like the rescission agreement or negotiations, trying to figure out who would be entitled to what, we referred to the money that he would be entitled to as his money.
So it wasn't something you had strictly defined?
No.
Okay. Did your discussions over the years, did those ever terminate this roommate agreement?
No.
So you continue to make payments, as we saw,
Yeah.
on the $3,500 a year?
Yes.
How much total have you paid to Zubair on the roommate agreement?
It was $28,000. He testified about receiving those payments, yearly payments from 2018 to 2022. And as we went over, there were 2 payments in 2021 and 2 payments in 2022. And then I also made that payment in 2025. So it all added up to $28,000.
Okay. So we'll take a look at the lease agreements. Let's see. Sorry. Stack. Let me pull the. All right, never mind. We're okay. All right, let's do. Can we publish again? All right. All right. This is the August 2022 Mothership Residential, aka Bosslandia lease agreement. And what was how much was the rent that was being paid this time?
$750 in 2020.
How did you calculate $750?
It was $500 for my niece and $200. Oh, I think it was actually $1,000 because it was $500 for my niece and $250 per roommate, and there were 2 roommates, so that adds up to $1,000. Later on, one of the roommates moved out.
Do you know when that occurred?
I think it was 2021, and so the rent was lower.
All right, let's take a look at 2021. That's 12. Okay. So let's look at the rent. Again, the same calculation to determine rent, but you're saying there was 1 fewer roommate. Is that right?
I believe so. Maybe that was the next year.
Okay, but
no, I think it was this year that there were only 2. There was only 1 roommate, so it would have been $750.
Okay.
We can look down and see who signed it, and then we can determine how many tenants there were.
Takes a second to catch up. Okay. So I see 2 names, Elise Sammartinian, and then looks like Brady Palmer.
Yes. So 2 tenants means the rent was $750.
Okay. And then 2022. Let's look at the calculation. It's a little bit more intricate.
Yes. So I had given my niece a discount while she was in college, just to incentivize her being in college. And our agreement was that the rent would increase to 80% of market rent over time, over the course of 6 months. So it started at $779 in August, and then by January 2023, the rent was $1,200, $1,279.
And this portion's highlighted. Why did you highlight that particular portion?
I think the changes that were made were highlighted.
Okay. And then also I see that it's being initialed by a couple parties. Do you know who those initials belong to?
Those are the tenants.
Okay. And there's also some delinquency provisions being put in here. Who is receiving the rent from these leases?
Zubair was receiving the rent, but it was considered my payment on the 2020 deal.
Okay. And you guys discussed that beforehand?
Yes, in 2020. I originally got the rent from her after the title transfer. I was still getting rent from her and putting it into a shared account to pay the mortgage. And then he told me that for tax reasons, he should be the one that's receiving the rental income. It was still going back into the same shared account, but instead of her paying me and then going to the shared account, she was paying him and then it went into the shared account. But either way, that was my contribution towards the 2020 mortgage. And the mortgage was like $1,100, $1,120 or $1,140. So by December 2022, the rent covered the entire mortgage.
So your contribution grew to more than half.
Yes.
Okay. Did Zubair continue to pay? Was he paying his half?
He was paying his half until the end of 2022.
Why did he stop paying his half?
He told me he didn't want to be in this agreement anymore.
Okay. And so what did that mean to you? What was going to happen if he didn't want to be in the agreement anymore?
My understanding was we agreed we would split the mortgage and we would split the profit. So if he wanted to end the deal, we should calculate how much profit there was and split that profit.
Okay. And then what would happen to the mortgage that was on the home?
Well, I would take over the mortgage on the property. I would pay the mortgage if we were ending the deal.
Would you try to get your name on the mortgage, or were you just going to assume payments?
I was wanting to get my name back on the house.
Okay. Did you take any steps to do that?
I tried negotiating with Zubair to do that, but when we calculated the profits, that's when he started saying that this deal doesn't make sense because the profits ended up being less than what he contributed to the deal.
Okay.
He put in the down payment and paid half the mortgage for a little over 2 years. But the profit ended up being like 20 something thousand, I think. So half of that.
So how did that compare to what his contribution had been?
I think his contribution was $15,000 towards the mortgage and $18,000 towards the down payment. He said there was also $7,000 of fees. So that's $40,000 that he put in. And the profit was like a little over $10,000.
Has anybody been paying the mortgage since 2022?
Yes, I've been paying the mortgage since then, the entire mortgage. while my niece was living at the property, her mortgage payment covered, or I'm sorry, her rent payment covered the mortgage. And then when she moved out, because Zubair threatened to evict her, I moved back into the house. And ever since then, in 2024, I've been sending him money every month on the first of the month, and it's on Zelle that I send him money, labeled Mothership Mortgage, and the amount I pay him is the exact amount that is on the last mortgage statement he gave to me in November 2022. It's $1,120.48.
And to your understanding, is he forwarding those payments to the lender, to the bank?
I really hope so. I do believe so, or else I think the house would be in foreclosure, but he hasn't confirmed. We did ask, I had my previous lawyer, ask him for confirmation that he's been using the money that I sent him to pay for the mortgage, but I was never given that confirmation. But I do believe that he has been using the money I send him every month to pay for the mortgage.
All right. As part of like the unwinding of the deal, did you guys ever discuss the free rent? Did you guys ever discuss him compensating you for free rent?
Yes, we could not come to an agreement on that.
What was your position?
My position was that it should be calculated based off of market rent, but with a discount. And I presented a few different options to him, like, because we were calculating the tiny house, and when he lived in the regular house separately, because when he lived in the tiny house, I believe he should have got a discount because of the bathroom situation. But I looked up the market rent for a 1-bedroom and a 2-bedroom house in my zip code, and I calculated 20% off of that. And then I added in amenities like he parked in the garage and used the laundry and utilities. So when I added it all up over the years, including the 20% discount for the tiny house, it ended up being around $50,000, between 50 and 60. And I also looked up how much the rent would be in like a studio apartment, because the square footage of the tiny house was similar to a studio apartment, about 400 square feet. And when we did that calculation actually together, it was our last in-person negotiation. And I was inviting him to help me figure out what a reasonable value would be for the time that he lived in my property. He was not happy about the 50 to 60,000. So then I said, okay, do you want to look at how much it would be for if we said it was like a studio apartment and we did a discount off of that? And he said, yeah, that makes more sense. And we did that calculation, but that number was even higher. So he said, okay, let's not do that. And then we said, okay, well, let's look at if we can find other tiny houses in Phoenix and see how much they're charging for rent in those tiny houses, and then we can give you a discount because of the bathroom. being detached. And again, that was even higher. Like, I guess tiny houses are trendy or something, and it was pretty expensive that way. So he definitely didn't want to do that. And then he just said that he's not paying me any back rent at all. And that's when our negotiations kind of fell apart.
Okay. Why were you asking for back rent?
Because if we're undoing the agreement between us, and the agreement was that he would get free rent, and he did get free rent for years, then to undo that, he should pay for the value of the free rent that he received.
Okay. You were receiving value from him? Were you receiving value from him during that time?
Like the $94,000.
Is that the value you considered that you received?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think that if you unwound that agreement, you'd lose that value?
Yes. If we unwound the agreement, I would give back the $94,000. He would give me the value of the free rent he got, and also give me that $28,000 in payments that I made. And also, he would pay back the $10,000 that he took out of the account.
So if you add all that up, stack up the free rent, the $28,000 annual payments on the loan, $10,000, what does that come to?
Well, it depends on how much the free rent would be, but if we went with that, if we went with the 50,000 plus 28,000 is 78,000, plus 10,000 is 88,000. So that's what I would be owed.
And how much would you have been giving him back?
If I owed him 94,000 and he owed me 88,000, then I would owe him $6,000.
Okay. And he was hoping to get back how much?
$167,000.
Okay. So in your mind, those figures just didn't stack up. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So you guys tried to work out some sort of termination or rescission of these agreements. Doesn't sound like it was successful.
No.
So in your mind, did those agreements continue in effect?
Yes, my understanding is if you don't reach an agreement in the negotiation, then the written agreement stays in effect.
Okay. All right. We heard Zubair yesterday talk a lot about how easy he is to get along with and resolve things with. Was that your experience?
That was not my experience at all. He was refusing to listen to logic. He would acknowledge his promise to me and my mom while we were talking that I would get to keep the house. But when I asked him to write it down, he refused for weeks. He said that he only wanted to do the negotiations while we're walking and talking, and that made it really hard for me to focus because, like, I'm a visual person and I need to see numbers on a piece of paper. But if we're just talking and I can't see the figures, it gets confusing. he would just talk me in circles, and he was refusing to keep his promise. To me, it was heartbreaking that he wouldn't write down the promise that he made me. Like, that's why I was crying. I felt like I was being betrayed. And I did yell at him one time. I was getting really emotional because I was afraid that I was going to lose my house.
Tell me more about walking and talking. What does that mean?
We would, when we did our negotiations at first, before there were any emails, we would just walk around my neighborhood, and at first I thought it was going to be simple, the rescission. I thought it was just going to be he pays back what he got and I pay back what I got. But the way that he wanted to do the rescission calculations to me seemed kind of backwards. Like, he wanted to start in 2017 and work forwards. He wanted to calculate as though, not as though the roommate agreement was performed and now we were undoing it, but he wanted to do the calculations as though the roommate agreement never even existed. So he wanted to be getting the 94K and all the profit off of it. And he would use just all these different like accounting tricks and his financial terminology that I don't understand to just confuse me and talk me in circles. And the walking and talking just wasn't, it wasn't helping.
Okay. How long did those negotiations last?
I think we started in September
Of what year?
of 2022, and then ended when he sent me that text, I guess. I mean, the last mediation we did was in February 2022. I think it was February 4th. And then about 2 weeks later is when he sent me that text claiming that he's the owner of the property. And at that point, we were no longer negotiating. He had just stolen my house.
Okay. What kind of claims did he make about ownership during that time?
During the negotiations, he was claiming that he should be entitled to ownership in my property for reasons like I used money from a shared bank account one time to pay my mortgage. So he said that means I'm part owner of the house. Or he said that because he helped me do repairs on the property, that means that he's a part owner of the house. And I explained to him that's not how it works. Like, property ownership, like the way that it's transferred is explicit. Like, both parties have to agree that the ownership is being transferred. And it seemed like he thought that he could just absorb ownership in my house by helping with repairs. I told him that's not how it works.
Okay. So did it feel like Zubair's claims of ownership, partial or otherwise, did those come as a surprise to you?
Yes, very much.
Did it feel like an attack?
Yes, it felt like an attack. It felt like a hostile takeover of my home, my property. Um, that's that's how wars start, by hostile takeover of someone else's property. Um, that's why I wrote that in that email, that he declared war on me by doing that.
Okay. What do you want to see have happen as a result of this lawsuit? What's your wish here?
What I would like to happen is I would like to take over the mortgage on my house. I would like Zubair to pay back the $115,000 that he took from my house, and if he profited from investing that money, I think he should not keep those profits.
So when you say the 115,000, you're referring to this deed of trust?
Yes, the second mortgage he put on my house without telling me.
Is this still encumbering the property?
Yes, I believe he said yesterday that there's $110,000 left.
Okay, so you'd like to have that taken off the property?
Yes.
Anything else?
That's what I want for my claims. We did also plead punitive damages.
Okay. Now, can you explain to the jury why, according to maybe perhaps Zubair's own testimony, you are still the owner of the mothership?
Yes, if you follow the logic from Zubair's own testimony, he testified that the 2020 agreement was intact until 2023. So that means that I had been making my payments. We both had that whole time. And he also testified that the only way you can consider that I had made payments on the 2020 deal is if the rent from my niece belonged to me. So if he's saying that I did pay, and the only way I could have paid is if the rent was mine, then that means the rent was mine. And as he testified, the rent belongs to the owner. So since the rent belonged to me, I was the owner of the property. That's the logical conclusion of Zubair's own testimony.
Do you feel in any way that you've been deceived by Zubair throughout the course of these interactions and transactions?
Absolutely, especially with that ownership agreement that he signed, that he has said so many times. He signed that to reassure me. But if you're reassuring someone of a promise that you made them, and you're reassuring it in writing, then what's on the paper should be a reflection of the actual promise that you made. But Zubair testified that what's on the document is not what it really means. He testified that he had a different intention than what's on the document. And so if what's on the document isn't true, then he wasn't reassuring me, he was tricking me.
And as a result of being tricked, what did you lose?
Well, I still live in the house, but it's been 3 years that I've been trying to get like legal rights to it back. And I lost that $115,000 of equity he took. Almost $100,000 in lawyer fees, trying to win my house back. I lost my ability to trust. I have not made a single friend in the past 4 years. I haven't been dating. I am in therapy for betrayal trauma, my mother as well.
If you had known back when the residence agreement was signed that Zubair considered it to be fake or phony, that it was just a ploy, would you have signed it?
No,
Would you have signed the roommate agreement?
no,
Would you have continued to invest and buy the tiny homes and develop the property with Zubair living there?
no,
Would your relationship have looked any different than it did before this lawsuit was filed?
yes,
Did you rely on his statements when he signed those agreements?
yes. And when he made me that promise,
All in there, Your Honor.
I'm sorry?
All in there, Your Honor.
Thank you. So it'll be a good time for a break. We'll see you in 15 minutes. Please remember the admonition. We'll come back with Mr. Handel's question. We'll see you after the break.
Thank you, Judge. Charged.